We're in this series right now on the Ten Commandments, but as I said all along, I don't know how long we'll be in the series because this is part 3 of commandment number 5. I think it's the final part in commandment number 5, but we'll see on that. And for those of you who are here for the first time, welcome. My name is Des, I'm the lead pastor here, and we're in a series called Set in Stone, which is a series on the Ten Commandments, and they are not some tyrannical God saying to you, do this or I will strike you down. That is not the heartbeat, I believe, of why God commanded these life things for us. It's wedding language. I believe it's a wedding language, and as Jewish people would come together, they would have a chuppah representing, a canopy representing the very presence of God, and bride and groom would share vows, but there's this image of God as the groom coming to his people, the bride, and saying, have no other gods but me. I am everything. I am your all-sufficient. I am your protector, your provider, your king, your leader, and I love you. Have no other lovers. Let's have this unique, precious relationship, and I will be all that you need. And then he goes to number 2 commandment. So therefore, don't make for yourself any images. Don't go and worship idols or fake counterfeit gods. Don't chase after any other. There's only room for 2 of us under the chuppah. Don't bring a third into it. And even this, do not even create an image of me for yourself, because why would you bow down to an image, a fake appearance of me when I am right here with you? And then he goes in and says, and my name is a very powerful name, and he says, do not misuse my name. Do not take my name in vain, but take it in victory. And then number 4, he then goes in, and this relationship we have here, this life, engage the rhythms of life, and let's set apart a time, specifically a precious day that we can be reminded of this relationship. Take a day of rest. The word Sabbath means to cease from activity. God wanted to say, hey, I'll provide, don't worry. No need to work 24/7. Relationship is important, and the rhythm of rest is important. If you've missed any of these, you can go online and watch them back. And then we went to number 5, and so God's establishing relationship. And then he says, and now you're going to go and live this covenant out in all of society. And the first one, he then says, so when it comes to living it out, the home is where we need to start. Honor your father and your mother, that you may live long in the land that I am giving you. There's legacy, there's a generational impact of honoring parents, the home. And we landed there, and I recognize that for many people, that is the environment that's the most important, but also the most painful. It's the one that we're reminded of things maybe are not the way we wanted them to be, or they are being that, and family has got so much related to it. Then last week, as part of Father's Day, I went some more, and then I had a deluge of responses through the interactive and through both with emailing me and people sharing on the porch that this thing, the family, this is where there is probably the most acute suffering, difficulty, disappointment, pain, hurt. So let me ask you some questions right now. Do not visibly or vocally respond, because you're all going to probably say yes to them. And before we dive into do not murder, do not commit adultery, do not steal, do not bear false witness, do not covet, all of those things are going to flow from the context of your relationship with God and application to them. So here's a question. Are you experiencing pain, hurt, struggle, disappointment, suffering, grief, doubting God's goodness when it comes to your family? When it comes to things related to your family and that home environment, is it everything you ever desired it to be? Or is there an acute sense of suffering? Here's the reality of this thing, suffering. Overall, I'm a pretty positive guy. Like, the glass half full, half empty. My glass is like 90% full. Like even if it's 10%. I'm that way, always look on the bright side kind of a guy. But at times that sometimes means that I logistically in my brain have a little bit of denial of the reality of pain. It's not that bad. My mindset. So here's the thing with suffering. There are thousands of millions of people probably who go, I get the God thing, but I see it factually, but I just cannot go there because if God is good, why is there all this stuff going on? Why? And it is a game-changing apologetic issue, and it's not enough for me just today. Here's the answers you give in those situations. I want us to go there and engage with it emotionally, relationally, and most of all spiritually today, this thing of suffering. Because when life doesn't go great, this is what happens. This is maybe what you do, what we do, what people do. They either run to God when there is pain, or they become neutral from self-preservation, or they run from God. That's what people do. They either blame God, or they go neutral and don't know who to blame, or they run to God as a source of, please help me. And maybe you've been all over that. And so maybe for some of you in the context of home and trying to move forward, I know this is real for many of you, but maybe you've asked these questions. Where are you, God? It's not that you don't think God doesn't exist, but you're asking, but show me yourself. I believe you're here, but do you actually care, really? Do you really care? And it's not enough to get all just theological here. There needs to be a reality that says, but does God care? Hey, God, why are you doing something about this situation? Why are you doing something about it? Is it only me who can see what needs to happen here? I mean, come on, God, call yourself God. I can see exactly what needs to happen to resolve this situation, so hey, God, listen to my ideas. Why are you doing something about this? Or maybe the ultimate one, God, it's just not fair. How is this fair? Let me give an acute, very, very visceral example of that. It's not fair. I don't know your such situations, but here's a reality that is there on an example of it's not fair. And this will tee you up to how personal we'll get. There are people today, maybe even in this room, who are saying, do you know what? This whole thing of honoring parents, I crave to be a parent. I crave for my home to be pregnant. We crave that, and it's a pain we are longing for and have been longing for years. So Lord, come on now. And that may seem okay, but then they look and see society and go, and God, here's my it's not fair moment. I am craving this so much, and yet I see hundreds of thousands of people discarding unborn children. And some of those reasons are it's inconvenient. How is that fair, God, that me here craving children, and yet you seem to have allowed children here only to be discarded? That's not fair. I want us to get away from nice, neat little Christian thinking and engage with the reality of, Lord, that kind of a situation puts my faith in a real tense situation. Even to the point of crisis. And can I say to you today, a crisis of belief is not a bad thing. So the word darkness, maybe, is real. Turn in your Bibles to Romans chapter 5, and you maybe want to put a marker in there. Hey, out in the porch every week on the racks, there's these things. They're just blank pieces of paper for your sermon notes. I'm going to say a ton of stuff today. There's no way you'll remember it. I struggle to remember it. And just want to let you know there, or maybe on your phone you can take notes down, or maybe take this piece of paper or a notebook, go home this week, and maybe Tuesday or so sit down and listen again, because some things today I'm going to scratch just the surface on to allow you to want more. So put something in Romans 5. I'm going to read a few verses, go back to it later on. So here we go. In this whole context of suffering and pain, and come on now, especially when it's got some kind of relation to your family. Therefore, Romans 5, in fact, let's jump to the end of verse 2 because of time. And we rejoice in the hope of the glory of God. Verse 3, not only so, but we also rejoice in our sufferings. Because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance character, and character hope. I have a phrase here that is kind of stolen from an awesome book by Craig Groeschel called Hope in the Dark. Recommendation for you. It's a small book called Hope in the Dark. And let me ask you this question. Maybe for you today, that's what you need, some hope in your darkness. Maybe there is darkness. Maybe you're not right in it, but your children are in darkness, or grandchildren, or an estranged person, or a marriage, or anything related to the home, the word darkness. You can go, oh, I can see some darkness. Can I have some hope in that? Here's what the church, in the West, is not good at, because we have the power of positive thinking. We don't allow space for lament. And God clearly allows space for lament. When's the last time you had a good rant at God? A good, it's not fair, come on, give me a break. And some of you think, oh, that's just not being faithful. That's dishonoring the Lord. Turn to Psalm 88. We could have gone Psalm 39, but I'll go Psalm 88. A lot of the Psalms have got this honesty from the psalmist at the beginning, having a, come on, and they end with a, but God comes through. And they end with a, wow, how awesome. Not Psalm 88, or Psalm 39, or the book of Lamentations, or the book of Jeremiah, where he's living for God and nothing really changes. And it's in the scriptures. I think for some of you, I want to give you the freedom to have a good lament, a good rant in your darkness. We won't stay there, but it's important. Let me read a few verses from Psalm 88. First, maybe 4 or 5 or 6, and then to the end, only because of time. Psalm 88, hear this. This guy, this worship leader, this Heman the Ezrahite, he writes this song, and he sings it. I don't know what tunes to it, but he says, oh Lord, the God who saves me. So he's positive. He's got hope. Day and night I cry out before you. May my prayer come before you. Turn your ear to my cry. For my soul is full of trouble. And my life draws near the grave. I am counted among those who go down to the pit. I am like a man without strength. I am set apart with the dead, like the slain who lie in the grave, whom you remember no more, who are cut off from your care. You have put me in the lowest pit, in the darkest depths. Jump to verse 13. But I cry to you for help, O Lord. In the morning, my prayer comes before you. Why, O Lord, do you reject me and hide your face from me? From my youth I have been afflicted, and close to death I have suffered your terrors, and am in despair. Your wrath has swept over me. Your terrors have destroyed me. All day long they surrounded me like a flood. They have completely engulfed me. You have taken my companions and loved ones from me. The darkness is my closest friend. So if you're feeling a little right now, God clearly says, you can bring it. His closest friend is not God in that moment. His closest friend is darkness. It's not always a good thing to have this line, and I've used it too often. Hey, life's hard right now, but there's always somebody that's worse off than you. There's always somebody going through a harder time. And I understand why we say it, but how does that help? When have you gone through a hard time and somebody's come and said, I know this is hard, but hey, give thanks, there's worse than you. When has that ever gone, oh, it's okay then? When has that ever worked? And I know it's a good heart saying, hey, but there's people worse than you. Suffering may be relative, but it is real. It is real. So let me just give a foundation for if suffering is real and the scriptures don't hide for it. Jesus even said, hey, in this world, trouble. You will have trouble. But take heart, I have overcome the world, but there is a reality to it. If that is the case, how do we respond? Are we going to respond by running to God, running from God, going neutral? There's a response. Let me just give a very, very high level, quick, rapid fire. You need to help with this. By the way, those of you who like to engage intellectually with subjects like this, I think Tim Keller's book, like living with something to do with living with the pain of suffering. It's a really thick book. If you're a brain thinker, that's going to get your brain going. Or for the rest of us, Hope in the Dark by Craig Rochelle. Anyway, but I'm saying there is something there. But let me just go with this. Here's 8 quick things to help you. You are experiencing suffering. How do we respond? How do we respond? Number 1, you need to recognize there are different kinds of suffering, but they are all suffering. Different kinds of pain, but they are still all pain. So you can't just say, but mine's worse than hers. It is something that is still a struggle. Let me give you 4 groupings on that. Number 1, there is suffering that is a result of your behavior, your choices. There is a suffering that is a consequence of. Now, what happens with that one is that seems to be partnered with guilt and shame. I did this, I caused this. And that makes an extra layer. Number 2, the other one is there is a form of suffering that has been done to you. A betrayal, an action of somebody else, an attack from somebody else on you. But then your response to that often is related to then resentment and frustration. But that is a real something, it's happened to you, and there's a victim that you're living in, a victim mindset. Number 3, there is the form of suffering that comes to all of us with no real random rhyme or reason, and that's maybe to do with sicknesses and death. The one who's died is no longer suffering, but you suffer as a result of that death, and grief is a form of suffering, and with that, it can get hold of you, and maybe with sicknesses and illnesses and what's going on here, and that loads you with fear. And it's a real suffering. And then there's the 4th one, which is the one where we often most point to God or there cannot be a God, and that's the word tragedies, disasters that for no apparent reason happened to you or to a people. Some kind of a tragic road wreck or a plane crash or a natural disaster or a whoa, and there's an expanse of famine and suffering, and you think, whoa. And often the answer is we have an anger and a resentment to God, or we think there cannot be one. They are all very, very real, and some may think, but that one's more serious than that one. I think we have to engage with the reality that the psalmist in Psalm 88 and the one in Psalm 39 is like, but this is where I am right now. So in the sense of set in stone and in the home of honoring parents, your big barrier right now, but there is so much pain there or related to it. God, is this what you meant? So how do we respond? Number 2, responding to it, recognize number 1, there's different kinds of suffering. Number 2, there are different kinds of personalities and how they respond to suffering. There are personalities here who just go, I want to fight. And they're a fighter. And they embrace that, and here we go. And there are some personalities who look at that personality and go, and there are some personalities who go in a corner in a ball. There are different kinds of people and how we handle suffering and different responses. Just be aware of it. Number 3, what we need to do, though, and every time with our personal pain and suffering and regret and guilt and all of that, is it is critically important that you are brutally honest. If anything, that's why Psalm 88 exists. God can handle your honesty. Be honest. Don't theologicalize it. Is that a word? It is now. No, be honest with it. God is big enough, strong enough. Be honest, be brutally honest. And weeping is a good thing. Though your sorrow may last for a night, joy comes in the morning. We want the joy in the morning, but what happened before it? When is the world at its darkest? Right before the new, but there is a darkest need. And so with that, number 4 would be then, you still at some point, though, in the midst of your suffering, have to have a reference for trusting. Who am I going to trust in right now? And don't make the suffering your friend. Who can I trust? Number 5, prayer. What's the importance of prayer here? Prayer in the middle of difficulty and pain and suffering and disappointment. And the why is this. It is a desire to connect with God. Prayer is, I want to. I don't feel like it. I'm not sure. But you need prayer in there because you have to have the desire. But Lord, I need to connect with you. And even though I'm not, I need to walk that way. And prayer is that opportunity. Number 6, you need some disciplined thinking. And disciplined thinking is, what is the truth here? Or more importantly, who is truth here? You have to have a foundation you can stand on. In the midst of all that is going on, there is still truth here. Number 7, you need community. If you are engaging in suffering, the enemy's strategy is always convince you nobody else knows how it feels. Nobody else can relate to where you are. In fact, you just suffer by yourself. And in some point, hey, this is just what you have to go through. Just you. And isolation is always a strategy of the enemy. You need community when you are struggling. And number 8, just because the suffering you are experiencing may or may not be your fault, you always need repentance and forgiveness. See, repentance is the word tashuvah in the Hebrew, is to return to God's original intention. Something may have caused you to be here, but God is always saying to you, come back under the hoopah, come back, come back, come back, let's engage it, come back. A returning to the Lord in recognizing that. So in the midst of suffering, a constant posture of repentance and the Lord's forgiveness, because in pain and in suffering, you will say things, do things, think things that are not always pure. Agreed? Hurting people hurt people. Out of that moment. What I'm landing here with you straight away is these 3 phrases. That's just some facts. Is with suffering and in these situations, there will be, I am doubting God, then I am waiting on God, but ultimately I need to be embracing God. What I want to get you to today. There's doubting God, and that is okay, and you can. There's waiting on God, and that is okay, and you should. But in the middle of it all, there is an embracing God that is really, really important. This word darkness and sorrow. Let me just skip. Go to Matthew 26. Matthew 26. We'll go to 27 as well. Darkness and sorrow. We can all relate to this at some level. Darkness and sorrow. And how can God really be there? How can he really care when I am in this darkness and I'm encountering sorrow? Matthew 26, verse 37 and 38. Jesus has been betrayed. He's in the Garden of Gethsemane on the night of his arrest. And here is Jesus, and I want you to understand. Right now, you may be encountering darkness, sorrow, despair, pain, rejection, guilt, hopelessness. All those things are real. So let's engage in Matthew 26. Hear what Jesus experiences here. Verse 37 of Matthew 26. He took Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee along with him, and he began to be sorrowful and troubled. This is Jesus. Then he said to them, my soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me. That may be okay, but who is saying that? Who is the one saying that? Jesus is saying, my soul is so overwhelmed with sorrow, I can't take it anymore. I cannot take it anymore. I'm at the point of death. It is that absolutely visceral. The pain he's encountering, his soul is overwhelmed with sorrow. So you in your situation right now, in your pain, does God care? Can he relate? Does he understand? Does he know? Can you embrace him? Now go to Matthew 27, and Jesus is now on the cross. He's on the cross, and all the insults and the beatings and the floggings and the abandonment and everything's all taking place, and he's on the cross. And in Matthew 27, I'm going to read just read verse 45 and 46. We see this moment in this context of darkness and sorrow and pain and difficulty and struggle and regret and guilt and pain from the 6th hour, verse 45 of Matthew 27. From the 6th hour until the 9th hour, darkness came over all the land. It's daytime, 3 hours. Darkness comes over all the land. Some of you are thinking, that was just 3 hours. I've been living with that cloud for weeks, for months, for years, for decades. Darkness is your closest friend. And let's see what happens here. About the 9th hour, Jesus cried out in a loud voice. Now wait. That word darkness for Jesus symbolized this: betrayal. He'd been insulted, rejected, beaten. He's alone, forsaken. The ultimate separation from his Father. That's where he is in that moment. And look what happens. So at the 9th hour, Jesus cried out in a loud voice. It's dark. There's no lighting. It's dark. He's on the cross and he shouts in a loud voice this phrase. Now, this is a phrase which many people, in terms of pronunciation, have butchered. And when you understand its true pronunciation, there is something in it, in that original Aramaic, there is something in it that just goes, oh. So I've done work and I've tried to get pronunciation right. I'm about 9 out of 10. But I want you to just to listen to, why do we need this? Why not just give us the English translation? Why do we need to see it in the original language? Why did God put it in here? I don't know. But he did. So maybe we should lean in. We know what it means. It means, my God, why have you forsaken me? The purest word, why have you abandoned me? Why have you left me here all by myself? Now listen to it. Listen to it. So it's dark. It's been hours. And Jesus cries out. He is encountering darkness and suffering and pain and all of that. And then he goes on and says, Elohi, Elohi, lama sabachthani. Wait for it, I'll say it again. Elohi, Elohi, lama sabachthani. Now here's the why. Elohi. Elohim is one of God's names. He cries it out. There is something breathy from the soul. Elohi, Elohi, lama sabachthani. And he cries it out. My God, and here's why. Why? God says, Jesus says the words, why? My God, why have you abandoned me? Why? So in the midst of your circumstances right now and what's been going on in your life and your home and your people, and you cry out a why, God says it's okay to say why. Because my son cried out why. Why? And we know the answer to the why, but he still had a why. Why have you abandoned me? Why have you left me here all by myself? It's a deep heart cry. A deep heart cry. And so the question for you is, your heart is the place of deepest commitment, isn't it? It comes from your heart. It's a place of deepest emotion, deepest trust, deepest hope. It's in your heart, isn't it? You long for the hope to rise up. You long for hope to pierce darkness. And we need to be reminded of a wedding language and go, where can I go to find that? Where do I go? So Romans 5 again, I stopped at the end of verse 4, and it says, verse 5, and hope does not disappoint us, because God has poured out his love into our hearts by the Holy Spirit whom he has given you. You see, at just the right time when we were still powerless, Christ died for the ungodly. You need to remind yourself in the darkness, that's what he has done for you. Now, I don't know what you're going through right now. I do for some of you, but I don't know what the majority of you are going through. I don't know what all this subject matter really means for you. Maybe it's physical, relational, emotional, financial. There's people, there's regret. You've caused pain, you've received pain. You've been the one who is the wrong behavior. Now you are here. You've been betrayed. You've been attacked in some way. Maybe it doesn't make any sense why God would do this. Maybe it's a sense of grief or sickness. And I don't know exactly what you're going through right now, but I do know this: God is still good. He is good. And he does love you, and he loves you enough to give his one and only precious son, that even he could imagine his own son crying out, but Father, why? Now we know we're this side of the knowing the answer to the why, because he doesn't stay on the cross and he's not dead, he is risen. And the tomb is empty. Talk about hope out of darkness. It's not the end. And we need to understand this, that all suffering is temporary. All healing is temporary. But there is an eternity that we can posture our lives with. Not that we should abandon this world, not at all, not even in the slightest. But we need to get a view of how great our God is. I don't know whether I've been thinking this the last few days, last couple of weeks. I don't know who first said it. It certainly wasn't me. But here's a phrase to maybe help some of you. The mountaintops of life is where you get the blessing of being able to enjoy God. But it's in the valleys where you encounter the embrace of God. The mountaintops is where you get to enjoy God. But it's in the valleys where you get to encounter the embrace of God. Let's take it in a human, from a parent. When does a parent to a child get to really embrace and care and love on and nurture and whisper to? It's in a child's valley, agreed? The enjoyment together and the play and all that, there is mountaintop moments of parenting, but the embracing and the getting alongside is in the dark times, in the valleys. So, in the midst of what you are encountering right now, or people that you are encountering, can we live life in such a way to lean in and go, I don't fully understand how you feel right now. I don't know what it feels like in exact sense, but I do know my God does. I do know Jesus does. And in the middle of it, he wants to embrace you. He wants you to encounter his presence and his love, to know that. I love this phrase that Grishel writes in his book, Hope in the Dark, and he writes this phrase: I don't know what it is like fully to understand what God is doing, but I know this. I've walked with Jesus for enough yesterdays to trust him with all my tomorrows. I've walked with Jesus for enough yesterdays that I know I can trust him with my tomorrows. That's hope in the darkness. I have so much I could say about this. Do you know what? I don't think you need more information. I want to allow some space now for some transformation. If the ushers could just come down and start serving the elements. I'm going to go into communion. If ever there was some visual imagery, symbolic presence of suffering and hope in the darkness, then we share communion to show what I shared with. Gethsemane is such a ridiculously acute emotion. So much went on in that garden. Just come down. I'll just start distributing the elements. If you're a follower of Jesus, this is an open table. Please take bread, cup, just hold on to it for now. Just the symbolic nature of Jesus' body, the very bread of life dying for you. The cup representing his blood poured out for you as an atoning once and for all sacrifice. No more perfect lambs needing to be sacrificed. He will be the one-time supreme Lamb of God to take away the sin of the world and be a suffering servant in the midst of all of this. But there is hope in the darkness. I was preparing this early in the week, and I sent a text message to Taylor, and I said, it was on Monday, I thought, I know what I need to preach on Sunday. I don't know how much I'm going to get through it, but I know it. And I said, we have to do a new song. We have to do a new song. And we have to do this, and I'll tell you why, because it's the one song that really speaks to me. So am I being self-serving? All right, then. But I want to share it with you. I'm not being selfish with my self-serving. I want to share it with you. In the book of Daniel, chapter 3, there's a moment where these followers of the one true God are arrested by the evil King Nebuchadnezzar, and they refuse to bow down to him. They refuse to bow down to him because they know the one who is the mighty king. They encounter this covenant relationship they are not prepared to break. They're not prepared to break the first commandment or the second commandment. They're not prepared to lose the third commandment of the name of the one true high God. And they so live that way that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego refuse it. And Nebuchadnezzar says, well, you guys, it's over. I want to throw you into my furnace, crank the heat up, guys. And they tie these guys up before they are thrown in the furnace. And it's so hot that the servants who are throwing the guys in die. They're even near it. And these three guys go in there and we'll die for this. We're all in. We believe our God could rescue us, but even if he doesn't, he is still God. Even if he doesn't, he is still God. And these guys get thrown into the furnace, and Nebuchadnezzar looks and says, hey, guys, how many did we put in there? How many men? Wasn't it 3? So how is it right now I'm looking in there and I see 4? And they're not even bound. They seem free in the middle of their suffering. How is it that they're not even... And how is it there is 4? And that 4th one looks like a son of the gods. This is Nebuchadnezzar. And there's this beautiful new song called Another in the Fire. He said, there is another in your fire standing next to you. There's another in the water holding back the sea. Should I ever need reminding of how you've been set free, there's a cross that bears the burden where another died for me. There is another in your fire. And so during this song, I want you to take the elements whenever you want. And if some of you, when it comes to your family, extended family, are right now what I'm talking to you about, you're experiencing guilt, pain, frustration, suffering, whatever it may be, I want to invite you to come out of your seats and come down the front as we sing this song. I almost want you to step in to know there is another in the fire with you. And the beauty of this song, I'm going to play it and the guys will play through it, and it's just breathtaking. It's called Another in the Fire. You can YouTube it, you can Spotify it, do whatever you want, download the lyrics and read them. This chorus is, there is another in the fire standing next to me. Verse 1 says, there was another in the fire. Chorus 2 says, there is another in the fire. And chorus 3 says, there'll be another in the fire. You see, my God was and is and forever will be. He is unmoved, unshaken, undefeated, and never undone. He is with you in your fire. And so will you step into that and receive his embrace? Yes, I pray release and freedom and restoration and wholeness and healing and forgiveness. But right now in this moment, it is okay to say, but God, why? Come with me. And so I want you to be able to get out of your seats and come down the front as a response to, Lord, I need your embrace. I need your embrace in this. I'm coming out to receive your embrace. And I'm standing and declaring these lyrics, Lord, I believe there is another in the fire, and I need you to stand with me. May I encounter that today. And the greatest gift you may extend this week to somebody who is going through pain, who is just saying, but where's God? You can go to him and say, he's right here with you. You can go through this on your own, or you can go through it with his embrace. And I don't know the whys, but I do know that he is good. And I encounter his goodness when I experience hope in the darkness. So take the elements whenever you want and give thanks. So band, start going through this song. You can take in the lyrics. If you know it, you can sing it. I want to stand up here because I just want to ask you to embrace and receive his embrace. And then, well, I don't know, we'll just do this for a little while. You can start by standing if you want. I don't know. Go for it.